Hello, and welcome to the Cultivating Confidence podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nicole Grams. I am a life coach who specializes in anxiety, health, and human design. And I also happen to be a functional medicine pharmacist. This podcast is a compilation of conversations that I've had with clients and colleagues. So listen in as we explore the mind, body, and soul's confidence in its many forms. So let's say that you have been trying to change your snacking habits for months. You go about your day with the best of intentions. You try to focus on work, your to-do list, and trying to not go crazy over how dumb your coworker is, whatever it is, right? It's time for a quick break, and you see the vending machine, and it is freshly restocked with all of your favorite snacks. And as soon as you see it, you get a craving. It hits you. You feel out of control, and all of a sudden you find yourself scrounging around for the $1.25 that you are going to feed into the machine to get your favorite thing, right? So after you have this in your hands, you go over, you sit down, and you allow yourself a moment of indulgence as you take your first one or two bites. And then the guilt comes flooding back about how you shouldn't be doing this, how you should be stronger than this, how you should be smarter than this. And if you just hadn't looked at the machine, you wouldn't have done this. So you should have known not to even look over there. That was dumb, right? But alas, you have let yourself down again. Surprise, right? So if you're me, you can copy paste this with the urge to scroll on social media or read books or to stand in the pantry until just to see what I can see every time I try to sit down and focus on what I want to get done. Maybe for others, you might add in a craving for a cigarette or a glass of wine to calm your nerves, or the urge to play a video game when you get home, or whatever it is. All of these are cravings or urges, and I am probably going to use them interchangeably as we go. But how I define them for our purposes today is basically just having a strong desire or impulse to do something. There's often a very strong sense of pressure or urgency to eat the thing or perform the action or whatever it is your body is telling you it needs to be done. It's like very persistent, but sometimes short-lived urgency that can be triggered by something from the environment. It could be a smell, it could be a color, it could be a emotion that you're feeling in your body, right? So these cravings and urges start in your brain, and they're very simple. The emotional brain is wired for three things and three things only. It is 1, to avoid pain, 2, to seek pleasure, and 3, to conserve energy and minimize effort. So the pain one seems obvious, but brain does not want to experience physical or psychological pain. So we're talking, we try to do things to avoid broken bones. We avoid getting cut or burned, or wearing clothes that are too tight that are going to cut off our circulation, right? Like we don't want to experience that. And also brain wants to avoid embarrassment and loss and grief and disappointment and all those negative emotions that we so frequently do experience. All right. So the conserving energy thing includes things like laying in bed for longer in the morning, not wanting to go for a run. But it also includes things like learning too many new things at once and brain wanting to shut down whenever you're overwhelmed. So that's a conserving energy, like, oh, there's too much going on. We need to shut down, right? The seeking pleasure thing also seems fairly obvious to me, but salt, sugar, fat, carbohydrates, but also dopamine from anything really. Could be from screens, from sex, from gambling, from impulsive shopping, whatever it is, right? So knowing that brain is wired for these things, it makes sense that brain wants you to behave in ways that that are not necessarily good for your long-term survival, right? And every time you do something that causes that release of dopamine, brain gets reinforced that whatever you did is something you definitely should do again as frequently as possible. So that's why sometimes people talk about having low dopamine mornings where you're not looking at a screen, because anything on a screen and scrolling on social media is feeding that dopamine, and it's like a false elevation and your brain just craves it. So it's, no screens, no whatever it is, no candy, no sugar, no whatever it is, right? But yeah, brain with anything that's going to give you dopamine that in the past has given you dopamine, brain is basically like, Okay, we see something that might be the candy this time. We have to go over and investigate and eat it, and we will get the dopamine and it'll feel amazing. I promise you, right now is what we need to care about, right? Brain will try to remind you every chance it gets to eat the thing that will give you the dopamine boost or remind you that you're overwhelmed and need to shut down and maybe escape into a book or escape into a video game or whatever it is, right? But think of it like a toddler, right? Toddler sees something they want. If they don't get it, they will throw a full on tantrum. And that is basically what an urge does in your brain when you don't act on it. And there's some good news and bad news in that. The bad news is that the urge is going to try to convince your brain as temptingly as possible that you need to take the action or you need to eat the thing, you need to do the thing, right? So that the toddler brain quiets down because we don't want toddler having a tantrum. We just want toddler brain to be calm. And the fastest way to make it calm is to give it exactly what it wants, right? And like I kind of said, there are triggers all over the place for toddler brain. It could be environmental cues like smells, sights, sounds, could be emotional triggers like stress, anxiety, sadness, could be social triggers like peer pressure or any social situation where this is the norm, right? Whatever it is. So they can be identified, um, triggers can be identified as just about anything that makes you feel an urge or a craving. And it's automatic. It's not something that you try to feel or think of. It is just something that happens, right? And it's not typically preventable when you come across it, right? It's like the initial thing that brain thinks, and then like you can respond to it however you want, but like the first thought is always going to be the urge, right? But for the emotional brain, the future does not exist. It is the epitome of living in the now. It wants instant gratification and it wants you to give in on all the urges, even though they're not helpful for your long term life, right? So, what's the problem? You might guess already. I've said several things already, but we overeat and we feel like shit, right? We gain weight and then society tells us, or we gain weight that society tells us we shouldn't have. And we think we're lazy. We must not care, whatever. We spend time on social media instead of spending quality time with friends or family, or we're distracted during the time that we have with friends or family. So screens at dinner, you're not digesting well enough. So you might end up with nutrient depletion in your body in a way that like you just weren't intending because you're just not digesting your food quite well enough because you're kind of stuck in this dopamine release hit of your screen, right? Um, we don't know or we don't learn how to exist in our bodies when we try to escape these urges that we have. So we kind of become a prisoner to how the environment is around us and how that makes us feel. We also don't make progress towards the goals that we have set for ourselves many times with giving into urges. But it's basically all garbage, right? So, what do most people do? First thing most people do is avoid the triggers. And this involves things like removing any hint of a snack from your house, staying home, never going to gatherings or celebrations again so you're not tempted. You get groceries delivered so you don't see the shelves of temptation, which might not be a bad idea to do it anyway, save you time. But anyway, you might delete all your social media accounts. You might sell your gaming system. You might take a break on the opposite side of the building that the vending machine's on. You might sit there pretending that well, actually, this one's kind of fits with the next one, but like pretending that somebody didn't bring the donuts and put them in the break room, you avoid the break room. So basically, you end up trying to change your life in order to avoid triggers. So, what happens when you want to go to a friend's birthday party and they've got that Costco cake with the amazing filling? Or you go to work and someone organized a potluck that has all of your favorite things, right? Or you go to dinner with friends and someone orders the big plate of nachos for the table. What then? Right. You can't just avoid the triggers indefinitely for the rest of your life. So when you come across them, you cram everything into your mouth because you can't have it any other time. So you end up eating the entire box of Girl Scout cookies in one night. Right. So, as you can imagine, this is kind of a drag because you don't learn how to control yourself around the things. So, when you finally do agree to go out to dinner with friends, you find yourself like eating all the nachos. You find yourself overindulging and feeling like crap. So, it's not the best option to try to just avoid it completely. But if you can't avoid it completely, what's the next choice? Next choice is resisting it. So the moment you feel an urge or a craving, you can feel resistance in the body. Often for me, my muscles tense up and I become very hyper focused on either bottling it up or ignoring it, because that's like what we've been taught, that like an urge is not something that you should feel, that is bad. We need to cram it down and pretend it doesn't exist, right? Um, but it's also where you need to use willpower in order to overcome the urge. And that's what makes this the most challenging, is resisting it, because if I could speak today, willpower depletes itself. And at a certain point, after staring down the plate of nachos for a solid 3.5 minutes, or attempting to tackle your overwhelming to-do list, and you notice a notification on your phone, you will probably give in to the craving, right? So resisting it only serves to keep it there and let it grow. It's kind of like trying to ignore a political campaigner who knocks on your front door, right? The more you ignore it, the more are going to come. The more they're going to try to get your attention. They're going to knock louder and stay there for longer waiting, right? Or it just seems like that, at least around election time. But you still don't have power over it if you resist it this strongly, right? Now, I could tell you about the benefits of getting replacements for things like carrots instead of chips, or sparkling water instead of soda, or reading self-help books instead of fantasy fiction novels, or whatever it is, right? So you're actually doing something more productive with your reading time, or whatever you want to call it. Um, anyway, we could also talk about meditation and deep breathing, and those are all ways to help your parasympathetic nervous system, the like rest and digest, the calming nervous system, come out. Like, there are good things about all of them, and they are sort of like band-aids in this case. They can be very helpful in a pinch, but they are not a good long-term solution. So, what is a way that you can continue to live life, go about your business, be exposed to whatever it is in the world that you want, as far as like a craving sort of thing, and still not lose your mind while you don't partake in the thing, right? The answer that may surprise you is to stop resisting the craving. And you may be asking yourself, well, wouldn't allowing the craving be doing the exact opposite of what you want? But if you think about it, resisting it requires a supply of willpower that's not reliable, it's not consistent. And if you allow the feeling of the urge, the feeling of the craving in your body, and you separate it from the need to take action, that's where your power steps in. So allowing the urge, allowing the craving in your body, noticing all of the physical sensations, and also noticing that you do not have to take action on it. Just because you feel these things in your body does not mean you need to take this action, right? So the feeling and the action are separate things. And the only time that you are actually out of control is when you start to think that you do not have a choice in what action that you take, right? So please know this. Allowing urges and cravings are muscles that need to be built up. It takes practice. It does not feel good. It, you're probably going to be terrible at it at first. It is also, in my opinion, work worth doing because it allows you to learn how to control your actions when you have these feelings come up in your body. It won't matter where you are or what you're doing, because you will be able to have the skills and the experience to be able to control yourself without forcing it, right? Great. So, how does one allow and then process the urges once they do show up? So, the first thing is always to stay present in your body. The moment this craving comes up and it's not a feeling that you want, then open yourself up to it. Get curious about it. Notice that it's not something that shouldn't be happening, that double negative there. So it should be, how do I know it should be happening? Because it is, right? Get curious about it. Wonder why. Is there an emotional connection to whatever it is? Am I super stressed about something else? Is there something going on in my body? Maybe my microbiome is really weird because I've been eating a lot of sugar lately, and it makes sense that it's trying to tell me to eat more sugar, right? Get curious about what's going on in your body and notice what sensations happen. Maybe you notice a tugging feeling. Maybe there's tingles in your arms or your stomach or wherever, right? And it may be helpful to say, this is what my craving feels like. This is what my urge feels like. And brain is for sure going to come back and say things like, we shouldn't be feeling this. You can't be feeling this. We need to stop this. We need to eat the thing right now. We need to do the thing right now. And that's okay. Let it say what it wants and still know that you don't have to take action. And I actually like to say out loud or just to myself, like, okay, brain thinks that this is super important right now. That's really cute that brain thinks that, right? But let the urge stay for as long as it needs to. Let your brain freak out. Tell brain it's okay. We will survive this feeling that's happening in our body and it will stop, probably faster than you expect. And just a reminder, when you start doing this, brain is not going to know what to do. It is going to freak out because every time it has pressed the urge easy button, you have responded like an obedient puppy. So if you have an urge for candy, you're there. If you have an urge or whatever specific thing it is, right? If you have an urge to scroll social media, you act on it, right? You do the thing. You're, you know, whatever it is. So your urges as you start trying this may feel a lot more intense for the first few tries. That is totally normal and totally expected. And some thoughts that might help you through, thoughts to try on. What if I just let myself feel this for another 45 seconds before I take an action? So, can I allow this urge to be in my body for 45 seconds? And then I move, and then I have the cookie, and then I, go to the snack bar, right? Another thought that might help, isn't it crazy how urgent this feels? Because like when you slip back from your brain and you notice how urgent and it almost seems like it's ridiculous, like, oh my gosh, oh, alert, danger, we need calm down, it's really not that serious. um Thinking the thoughts, almost every time I have felt this, I have obeyed. No wonder my brain presses this button every time, because it's worked every time. Another thought that might be helpful, it's not true that I don't have control right now. I can find control even during this craving. And then you can make up whatever story you want to make up a scenario. If someone was going to give me $1,000 to not act on this craving, would I be able to resist? If someone was going to punch me in the face if I acted on this craving, would I be able to resist it? And by resist, I mean like allow the feeling in the body without taking action. So I guess I should have been a little bit more careful with how I was saying it there. But you are allowed to make up whatever scenario you want that will help show you how much you can control your action that you take on the urgent feeling. Because I swear, if somebody were to stand there with, I mean, it might even only take $1. Somebody standing there next to the donut saying, I'll give you $1 if you don't eat this. All right, I'll take the dollar. Sometimes it's not worth it, right? Sometimes it's making a conscious choice to indulge in the thing. And when that happens, I want you to give yourself permission to do it, because it is worse for you to I'm just going to stick with food just because it's easy, but it's worse for you to eat the donut and feel guilt and shame and embarrassment about eating the donut than it is for you to just eat the donut and enjoy it. Like the chemical imbalance in your body when you are hard on yourself is worse for your digestive system than just eating the sugar. So let yourself indulge when you are making a conscious choice to do so, right? All right. So the more you practice allowing the feeling in the body without acting on it, the more your brain will separate the sensation from the action. And think about how many times you might need to be willing to participate or be willing to experience the new urge if you knew 100% that if you did, you would rewire your brain and be able to reach your goal and stick to it, right? Would you quit after 5 times of allowing the urge to exist? Would you quit after 50 times? But if you knew 100% you'd be able to change your brain wiring, would you endure it 500 times? And luckily, and it's sort of like how many times would I be willing to go through this to succeed at my goal? Luckily, it doesn't take 500 times usually, but it will take more than 5. I would suggest keeping track of it if you want to. It might be helpful as a little reminder of how far you've come. I have even used a tally sheet to mark when my brain has the very strong urge to not fold my laundry. Because brain wanted clean and dry to be good enough, but spouse disagrees. And sometimes this is just not a battle that I'm willing to fight. So I give myself a little pep talk, sort of like an anti-pep talk, actually, about how I really don't want to do the thing. It's stupid. I should just be able to leave it. And also, I am going to choose to do it, even though every ounce of my being hates it in this moment. So if you are consistent with your practice, it is impossible to get to 100 allowed cravings in your body and not have your brain rewire itself against that specific reward. Because when you consistently take that dopamine reward away, brain will stop giving you that urgent signal and you won't have to deal with the urges nearly as much. But even then, you'll know how to handle them and you'll know that you can separate what feelings are happening in your body from the actions that you take. You'll be able to stick with your goals, no problem. All right, so to recap, urges and cravings are normal. They are your brain telling you that you probably got dopamine from doing something and you should always do it again, right? But if that's not helpful, we're going to choose a different path. It is not helpful to try to avoid or resist craving triggers for the rest of your life. What is more useful is to allow the urge to exist, feel it in your body, get used to the feeling. Like, even though it's not something you want to be feeling, like, let your body know, let your brain know that you are safe. You're not going to crumble. You're not going to whatever, just notice that you're not dying by not acting on the urge. Practice will allow the brain to rewire itself against the reward it thinks you get for acting on the urge. And you can practice anywhere and anytime. And you can control your actions even when brain is having a screaming tantrum at you. All right. Happy cravings, everyone.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. Many of you will be able to take the ideas that you've heard and apply them in your daily life, and that's really all you need. That's amazing. But for those of you who could use a little one-on-one help with how to make these things actually work for you in your real life, please reach out. The link to schedule a consult with me is in the show notes. You don't have to do this alone. See you soon.